Hey guys, I just wanted to review some of the stuff that we've covered so far, and as you probably remember, we mainly talked about setting up lesson modules in Moodle. As you may remember, a lesson is an activity that comes in various shapes and sizes, but overall it falls into one of two major categories. The first one is a simple lesson, and the other one is a branching lesson. Now, the nature of a simple lesson is that the workflow is linear, which means that one piece of content or activity follows another until they reach the end of the lesson. We can visualize it by looking at this Jamboard here. Let's say this is our first piece of content. This could be a presentation, it could be an article to read, or anything else that the student needs to get acquainted with. This is then followed by the first question or a set of questions, or any other type of call to action type activity, and then followed by some more content and more questions. Very simple, and it's actually pretty effective, especially for a standard P lesson methodology. But remember that we can also go with the slightly more advanced branching lesson, and the branching lesson will have a piece of content which is going to serve as an umbrella for the whole thing, and then sub-contents, sub-content 1, sub-content 2 and sub-content 3, all of which will lead to their own sets of activities, questions or exercises. And it's the job of the course designer to set the lesson up in such a way as to direct the student to the correct branch of the workflow. And I'm going to teach you how to do that as well. So, in order to set up a lesson, we need to look in the activities section because, as we said, lessons are activities. Therefore, we're going to try to add an activity, and sure enough, the lesson will be found among these options here. Now, before we start working on the content, every lesson needs some basic information, and that's first of all the name, and then optionally a description. If you do decide to include a description, make sure to check the box below. Like so. You may also want to control the appearance of the lesson, for instance by enabling a progress bar, and even more importantly the availability, so the time frame during which the lesson will be accessible. And lastly, you can also decide on the particulars of the flow control, for instance whether the student is going to be able to have a second chance at some of the questions or exercises. Now that the basic information is put in, we can work on the contents. As for a simple, so linear lesson, we're going to start with a content page, which is going to serve as our first presentation. That also needs to have a name and may or may not include a description. However, the next thing to do is to work on the contents. Here we're going to take the example of media. We're going to upload an image. By the way, always make sure that you have the necessary rights to use the image in your course. When selecting an image, also remember to decide on its size. And as you probably remember, the best thing to do is to give it 800 pixels and then ask the program to resize the image accordingly using the option Auto Size. Also make sure to check the box that says the image is decorative only, because this is going to allow you not to include a description for every photo you include. Now it's time for the content, so the call to action. So what you actually want the student to do. This can either be a question with a set of correct and incorrect answers, or a simple command such as I want to move forward, I understand, or I want to go back. In this case, we're going to be using responses, which are going to decide where the student goes next. After we're done doing this, we save the page, and there we go. The first content page is ready. Now let's move on to another one. We'll add another content page that follows the first one, and as you'll see, it will be connected to the first one. Also give it a name. Think about some contents. This time it will be another image. And upload the file using the same hints as with the previous one. And now we can decide on the call to action again. So again, a set of responses that will decide where the student is directed next. But make sure to remember that in this particular case, where the student can go is either forward or backward, because this is a linear lesson. So the student can either go forward to the next content page or to the last page, or go back one page or more, or even go back to the very beginning of the lesson. But it's still a linear flow. And that way, the page is ready. We can now save it, then move on to the last one. So page number 3 is going to be our final content page. We're also going to provide it with a name and also upload an image along with a description. Just make sure to check the boxes and resize the image and save it. As you can see, it fits nicely in the page. So the final call to action, so the buttons, something that will be represented as the buttons that the student may click. In this case, it can either be a return to the first page or finishing the lesson. So what we can do right now is preview the whole thing. So check how it works. Alright, the first page. Let's check the correct answers. And the correct answer again. And as you can see, the lesson works properly. Now let's check the incorrect answers. This should keep us on the same page. And it's working. And the last button goes to the end of the lesson. As you can see, that's also working. Now let's check the incorrect responses on the second page. As you can see, keeps us on the same page, just as we wanted. And the last one I give up. End of the lesson. Alright, that works as well. Now the next thing for us to do would be to design a branching lesson, which is a slightly more complex type of lesson. And in this particular case, it's vitally important to plan your lesson out, because this is going to be a bit more complicated. So it's a very good idea to make even a very simple plan, but something that's going to give you an overview of what the lesson structure is going to be like. This is going to be super helpful when we actually get down to designing the lesson. In our case, the branch will start with an umbrella presentation, which is going to be the main presentation of the lesson. And then it's going to branch into 3 sub-presentations or sub-pieces of content, which will then be followed by questions, their own questions, and we'll call them simply question 1, question 2, and question 3. That way, the student will be given a general or overview type of presentation, and then we'll be able to progress to the particular topics, learn more about these topics, and answer questions to confirm that they've understood what they needed to learn. If successful, they're going to move to the next topic, and then the next set of questions, and then, if they're answered successfully, the last topic and the last set of questions. If the last set of questions is answered correctly, the student will move to the end of the lesson. However, an incorrect answer to any of the questions will, in our case, revert the student back to the overall presentation in order for them to learn more and then try the questions again. So this is a fairly simple overall plan, but as you can see, it's already a bit more complicated than it was the case with the linear lesson. Now, the reason why it's important to have a plan like this in the first place is that it's going to be a lot easier to start designing the lesson from the end than from the beginning, because you need to make sure that all the individual components are properly connected to each other. So let me just show you how it works. Let's go over to our Moodle platform.